Thanks. Well, thank you very much for this very warm welcome in this remarkably beautiful place. My mother was an immigrant from Australia, so I have to admit it reminds me of a certain building in Sydney. So as our host said, this is a room filled with very, very talented people. And I think we all share a love of a challenge because it gives us the opportunity to be creative and it gives us the opportunity to give. And that's probably what sets us aside, makes us different more than anything else. And it's an incredible gift. We also know that it's that quality that defines which groups, which societies are going to do well. To what degree does whatever group you care about have a large number of people who can cause change at a high skill level? And how good a job have you or we done in helping them work together in an open way? That's really what's going to define who succeeds and who doesn't going forward. 2 summers ago, we had a summit meeting of Ashoka Youth Ventures. This is 12 through 20-year-olds. And a very black 15-year-old young woman from Philadelphia got up after a dinner, and she said, I remember this quite vividly, "I get it. It's not race. It's not gender. It's whether or not you're a change maker that determines whether you're going to be a winner or a loser. It's not race, it's not gender, it's whether or not you're a change maker." Now, we all have a very fundamental choice we have to make. Heretofore, a small group of people, us basically, have had that gift of being able to be creative and give. And the choice we have to make now is, are we going to continue with it just being us, or are we going to make sure that everyone, without mental reservations, everyone have that gift? Are we going to make sure everyone has the skills and the confidence that they can live life in the same sort of rich way? Our Icelandic colleague pointed out that we've made and are making a big effort to make sure that everyone is literate. That was a decision the world made 100 years ago, and we've done a reasonably good job. Now we've got to make the next decision. Are we going to make sure that everyone has the social skills, not just the knowledge skills, but the social skills to be able to really contribute in life? And I'll come back to this, but they basically are empathy, teamwork, leadership in a very new way, and the ability to use those 3 skills for change. Those are 4 learned, complicated, not easy skills. And just let me pause for a moment on empathy. The fact is that in the world, the rate of change is going up exponentially, which means every year the proportion of life, of anyone's life, that is covered by the rules is going down. And if you don't have the skill of empathy, you are going to hurt people, you're going to disrupt institutions, and you're gone. They do not care how much computer knowledge you have. That's the main cause of marginalization of 20-25% of the world's people. If you don't get it at home, in the street, or in the schools, where are you going to get it? And how many elementary school principals, even here in Norway, know that they are failing if they've got one second grader who has not grasped this skill at a high level, and that all the kids are practicing it? So it's a fundamental choice, and I just want to add a little warning. Any society, India, Norway, the US, the world, that does not make a decision that this generation of young people are going to have these skills is just bought a one-way express ticket to Detroit. 50 years ago, Detroit was the top of our technology and wealth and pride. And in the last 10 years, it lost 25% of its population. That took 50 years. We don't have 50 years because the nature of that curve is it's moving faster and faster. And anyone who does not have those 4 skills is not going to be able to play. And that's the worst thing you can do to anyone. Now, I'm going to come back to this and what it means for all of us, but first of all, let me give you a sense of what these historical forces are, and then focus a bit on the absolutely central role that the social entrepreneur plays. So, what are these forces? Throughout our prehistory and history, human life has been organized around repetition. Person A or Group A keeps doing what it does, and that fits with B, who keeps doing what it does. A very coherent system. So our educational arrangements are make sure you get a body of knowledge and master a set of rules, and then you're fine because you can just keep repeating that. And we've built institutions to be efficient in repetition. A few people at the top maybe think, but everyone else through a nervous system that goes down pretty vertically is under a set of rules and incentives. And there are walls. It's very characteristic. Unfortunately, this world is falling apart. And why? Because about a little more than 3 centuries ago, a very profound revolution took place. Business in Northern Europe said, if anybody has a better idea and they implement it, we're going to make you rich and respected, and then we're going to copy you. And that set in motion this explosive growth, which is the central fact that we face. The rate of change is going up exponentially, mathematically true. The same is true for the number of people causing change. And probably most important, the combinations of people and the combinations of change makers. That is an incredibly powerful force. We cannot stop it. We don't want to. It's a fact. And it means these arrangements are falling apart. And we already have one foot in a new world, which is very different. It's not built around repetition. It's built around its opposite, change. And change is just as internally coherent as repetition. A changes, it bumps B, C, D, they change, and so on. Change begets change. So the old arrangements fall down. 40% of the US workforce now are freelancers. The average person will have 14 jobs in the course of a life. And we're organizing, we have to organize in a very fluid team of teams. Why? Because you're serving something that's constantly changing. And that means you've got to bring together different combinations to be able to continuously provide the highest value. A team is by definition something where everyone is a player, and in this world where an increasing portion of the value is in contributing to change, you better be a change maker. So empathy, teamwork, leadership of this new, very fluid type of structure, and for change. So we're at a tipping point. No one knows exactly when it tips, but I think we're very close. We've got large parts of the world already there. You can just see the movement. So the second point, social entrepreneurs. What is the most powerful force in the world? It's always a big idea, but only if it's in the hands of an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what sector. That's what moves history. At this time, we need the social entrepreneurs very critically for the transition and for this new world. They operate as a very critical gyroscope that keeps us on track for efficiency, equity, sustainability. what is a social entrepreneur? Well, as the systems change, you need more entrepreneurs of all types. That's what entrepreneurs do. They work on the big systems. But you need some who, from deep within them, are committed to the good of all. And therefore their work is. And so when in the interplay of other forces, the world starts heading in an unfortunate direction, they pull it back to the center, to serving the good of everyone. And we're only going to need that more and more. And that's why the field has really come up in the last 30 years. It's now quite essential. So let me quickly introduce you to one or two Ashoka Fellows. This is Mary Gordon. She's from Canada. If you heard her talk, you'd think you had found Celtic Mary Poppins. She was teaching in the Toronto schools, and she saw increasingly that kids were coming, and the only answer they had when someone made them uncomfortable was aggression, which of course invites aggression back. And every time that children go through that, that pattern gets deeper and their future more distant. So she gave herself permission to find a simple way that schools all across the world could use that would ensure that every young child masters the skill of empathy, which, as we've just discussed, is completely critical. It's the foundational skill. Now she's gone from 2 classrooms to 19,000 classrooms in 7 countries, including several European countries. Bullying rates come down and stay down after her intervention. So what does she do? She asks the schools to give her a couple of hours a month for 8 months. And at the beginning of the school year, she brings to the 1st grade or 3rd grade a 4 to 6 month old child, plus mom, who wears a t-shirt, the professor. And professor resides on green blanket. The 1st graders have got to figure out what is the professor saying, and then what is the professor feeling. And they're observing the parent-child level of empathy. This is a very simple but powerful form of limbic learning. Well, we have 700 fellows out of the 3,000 focused on children and young people, so we know how to do this. But we've got to help the world see how to get there, and that we have to get there. If you've got a problem, there's a social entrepreneur for it. So this is Bright Simon from Ghana. Reportedly, 30 to 40% of the drugs, pharmaceuticals in Africa are fakes. And he said, well, how do we solve that problem? Now everyone's got a cell phone. So he set up a system with a number of pharma companies that you can whip out your cell phone, look at the number on the bottle, and call in and find out whether it's legitimate or not. If there's a problem, you need a social entrepreneur to fix it. And we've done 10 years of evaluations focusing on the 5th year after the entrepreneurs get started. The most important figures here are over half have changed national policy within 5 years of starting, and 3/4 have changed the pattern in their field. Now, they're very powerful individually, but together we're much more powerful. So when we're working together in collaborative entrepreneurship, it's never been done before. We think over the next 5 or 6 years, working with people in this room and people like you in other parts of the world, we will be able to make sure that every young child masters empathy. That's very, very powerful. And then there's one other thing entrepreneurs do. They're mass recruiters of local change makers. Mary is not teaching 19,000 classes in 7 countries. Some group of people in the Isle of Wight, don't ask me why, got up and said, we want this for our children. And they became local change makers. And they become role models and recruiters, and some of them the next generation. So the social entrepreneurs are important. They're critical as we move into a world defined by change. And I hope many of you will consider that as something that you can do. Mary gave herself permission. You could have solved that problem once you'd done that. So now back to you. What does all this mean? Well, first of all, I think we all have to ask ourselves, are we making sure that we are excellent at those 4 skills, that we're working at that? Second, are you helping your friends master those skills and understand why that's important and have the confidence to give themselves permission to use them? Third, what about your children? If you have a 15-year-old daughter who comes to you and says, Mom or Dad, the way this is run is just stupid. This is a mess. You have just been given a gift. You can turn to her and say, well, why don't you get your friends together and you figure out how to solve this problem? Who, me? Yeah, you can do this. And by the way, this is totally critical if you're going to be successful in this world of change. Any parent can do that, anyone who cares about a young person. And the second big area is everyone here cares about some group, a religious group, a business, a citizen sector group, the whole society, a city. Are you going to help that group understand that it has to make this difficult transition from being an institution to being a fluid team of teams? Can you help them get there? That's a huge and wonderful opportunity we all have. And the last thought is, again, it's very hard for us to understand what it's like not to have the skills that are second nature to us. But it's terrifying. If you don't have the skills to contribute to change, the world becomes more and more mysterious, you're more and more marginalized, and we don't understand what that's like. But to have the sort of world that we want and need, we have to make sure that everyone is a change maker. Everyone has that gift. And we can make that difference. This is a much better world. You can't have real equality if only a few people have the real power. Only a few people really know the game they're in. If people master empathy and that becomes central to them, then we can trust people because they're not just following rules out of fear of punishment. It's deep within. It's a much better world. So let's make sure that as we walk through this session, this gathering, we commit ourselves to make sure that everyone has the joy of being creative and of giving. Thank you.
Well, we could just stand here. I wanted to ask you, the thing about Bill Drayton that you may not know is that he's a wonderful conversationalist and perhaps a preeminent conversationalist, at least as much as a speaker. And so I thought it would be fun to just have you field a few questions for us. It's been 35 years since you started writing and speaking about social entrepreneurship. Here we are, 2012. Everybody wants to be a social entrepreneur today. It's almost as if this concept went viral all of a sudden. What happened?
I think we are at the tipping point, and we sense, even if we don't have the words, that we're moving to this much better place. A couple of years ago, when we talked about this, you could sense that a lot of people really didn't want to hear this because they were afraid people would laugh at them. And we're getting to the point where people are going to be feeling, oh, if I don't have something to say here, people are going to laugh at me. And then we're really into the tipping process. So you mentioned the universities. We just had an exchange between over 100 universities from around the world in Ashoka U, where we're helping universities become campuses that work on this, that make sure every young person there has this sort of skill set, that the education department is doing research on empathy, that the business school is trying to tear down the walls. You can't have walls in a team of teams world. It's fluid and open. And just last week, we had a meeting in Mexico, and 55 universities came because they wanted this. So it is, I think we really are entering the tipping point.
Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times, he said that social entrepreneurship is the 21st century answer to the student protesters of the 1960s. Is that accurate in your view?
Well, entrepreneurs are not protesters. They're a very different type of person. They do not want to get burned at the stake. William Tinsdale, as you may know, was burned at the stake for trying to translate the Bible into English only a few hundred years ago. That gets in the way if you're changing the world. Of course, the concern about a problem is the same, but giving yourself permission to actually change the world requires you really being open and listening to everyone and not being ideological. And it's the most disciplined field because you have to listen to everything, not just one discipline, but to the whole. If it starts not working anywhere, then you've got to adjust either the world or the idea. So the entrepreneur is a very, very distinctive personality type, and I think they have probably the same concerns, but it's a different skill set.
Great. Well, we're thrilled that you were willing to come all this way to talk about social entrepreneurship. In case you're interested, Bill has agreed to be part of the Ashoka workshop later this afternoon. So if you'd like to talk more with him and hear more of what he has to say, we'll hope that you'll join that. I know that for most of you, you've already registered and you're already sort of set for what you're going to do later this afternoon. But I did want to point out that he will be here throughout the day. And you can also see if maybe you can talk with him in the hallways or during the breaks or during lunch. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
And thank you all.